Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Eastern Border. Today we have Juris Kaža once again, and this time it's not about the war. Well, war is going to be mentioned quite proudly because you can't get rid of it, but we have presidential elections coming soon in Latvia. And that's a bit of an important issue, since here in the Baltics, it kind of shows our attitude towards the world and everything, because our president is more or less a representative office, but carries a lot of weight. And our would-be incumbent, Egils Levits, decided not to run because, quote here, of a too conservative coalition, approximately. But it's just interesting. A bit of a bizarre situation is happening inside the coalition, outside of it, and how everything's going a bit crazy. So hello once again, Juris, and welcome to Eastern Border.
Yeah, well, hello, yeah. Well, first of all, when you say presidential election, it's an election by the parliament. It's not like a big campaign. It's not Turkey. It's not the U.S. It's not any of the other countries where the president has a different constitutional and political role than here in Latvia. So indeed, the president is supposed to sort of represent the entire people in some sense. Is this kind of person that is sent to cut the ribbon on new hospitals, go to schools, go to public gatherings of various sorts that are non-political, commemorating events in Latvia, whatever. That's what he does, or he or she does. It's not really a big deal, but the big deal now is that this election shows the kind of weird political configuration that we have and have had since the actual election to the Saeima, which was a popular election where, as many of the population as wanted to vote it. And that is that we have basically a conservative leading government coalition that is sort of tolerating the prime minister from a centrist liberal party, which is sometimes, it seems to me, trying desperately to keep the liberal and centrist part of its politics from being too obvious.
Oh wow, yeah, that was awful. I mean, Mr. Dombrovskis, our ex-prime minister, who is now in Europarliament, he posted on Facebook about, statistical data about how economy has grown and all this stuff, and it was the most technocratic, least marketable thing ever. I was confused about how can you post something that will offend a lot of people, because it was yet another proof that it was more about showing the nice little percentage growths and all these little tiny details to make it look nice, without any data that even like business people use to just, show that, hey, we have a 0.5% growth. It's just so weird.
I haven't seen, this you talk about Valdis Dombrovskis, the EEC commissioner. I haven't seen that. I have seen reports that we were supposed to have had the strongest growth rate of the three Baltic countries.
He posted something that was to endorse, apparently, the presidential candidate, because obviously he wouldn't have posted it otherwise, because, the same party, but he posted a purely, absolutely technocratic post on Facebook praising our growth and how Jaunā Vienotība, our central liberal party, has achieved this growth, and without any context and with meaningless numbers, with tons of statistical manipulation.
Well, I'll have to have a look at that. The thing is that we have a coalition where, of course, the position of the new unity, Jaunā Vienotība, is pretty clear, cautiously centrist liberal. You have the National Alliance, which is, at its best, it's sort of a classically conservative party oriented toward the Latvian voter. It happens from time to time when the dogs get loose, so to speak, in the National Alliance. Then it's pretty sort of xenophobic sounding. It gets into some nasty things about partnership laws and that kind of thing. And then you have United List, which is a weird party, but I would say also fundamentally conservative, socially conservative. These guys are the ones you will find also opposing the civil partnership law. You will find them probably, although it's not a real issue in Latvia yet, you will probably have them coming down on the side of restricting abortion rights and restricting reproductive rights for women. And they're kind of a mixed salad. The German name is gemischte Salat of political views. You have the Greens who defected from the Greens and Farmers Party, Zaļā zemnieku savienība, but the green part of that is gone now.
Talking about Zaļā zemnieku savienība, that entity, as best I can put it, was the weirdest issue ever, because nowhere else in Europe, or in fact the world, you would see Greens and farmers making a union. That was a bizarre issue, which was historical for Latvia specifically, because Kārlis Ulmanis, our autocratic leader, who was also kind of well loved in this country, by the way. It's a long story about him. Listen to my historical episodes for that. But the very fact that they had a union was just bizarre. But now I think it's broken up, and it's just a bit of an interesting mess, I suppose.
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, you can have Greens who are all for domestic, localized, ecologically sound farming. And you can have other Greens, or you can have another green viewpoint against industrial farming, which, the giant 10,000 or 20 or 30,000 piggeries that we have in Latvia that generate enormous quantities of pig excrement and smell for miles around, and other practices that are sort of monoculture practices where you just grow one crop until the soil can no longer take it. There the Greens have a good point against the most extreme forms of agro-business. But we don't really have that much in Latvia. Latvia's not really big enough to have these massive cattle farms or something like that. But so I don't think it's totally inconsistent for Greens and farmers to be together.
I mean, the Dutch have their farms, and they're doing pretty well. They're one of the largest agricultural exporters on the planet. I mean, and they're smaller than we are, territorially.
Well, yeah. They have somewhat different climate.
No, that is also true. It's cold here. Just saying.
I don't think that the Dutch Green Party is fighting the if there is an agrarian party in Holland, they're not fighting each other. They have points of contact and points of disagreement. So I think the green element in the salad, known as the United List, is probably not a bad thing. Of course, it leaves the Green and Farmers Party, A, not greed, B, still under the control of a convicted criminal, Mr. Lembergs, the ex-mayor of Ventspils. So they're sort of a marginal, shady little party, still some seats in the Saeima. What is worrisome to me in the whole configuration of the parliament ahead of the vote for president, muscles that are being felt by the Latvia First Party under Einar Šlesers, who is not only a serial entrepreneur, in the good sense, he's had companies here and there and this and that, but he's also a serial founder of political parties. And the Latvia First movement is the latest one of, 4 or 5. And that is a radically conservative party that is looking for even, doubling down on this marriage, and families can only consist of a biological man married to a biological woman, and, children and all that stuff. They are really anti-LGBT. They were up until the war came along, all for extensive trade and relations with Russia. He had businesses in Russia. Those, of course, may well have been lost. Something that has to be remembered. He was talking about what a great and glorious future we would have trading with an economy that is the size of New York State. Less diversified, probably, in what it has to offer than New York State, if you look at it that way. So, that's something that makes you wonder about what the Latvia First Party is all about. And then, of course, during the election campaign, they had a strident campaign in favor of this, tightening the definition of marriage and family by yet another amendment. The first amendment that defined marriage as between a man and a woman and nothing else was pushed along by Einar Šlesers back in, I think it was 2005. I think he sponsored these concerts all over the country. Concerts were nice. Nobody, dislikes people singing, sort of the Latvian Schlager songs. But then, everybody was asked to sign this petition.
Šlesers is a bizarre person. I especially liked when the Rīgas Laiks, one of our more intellectual philosophy newspapers, produced an interview with him. unedited completely, and that was just something to behold, I think. Schlesers is continuously amazing.
This is where the beauty comes from. The intestines part was there.
Yeah, exactly that.
No, I mean, to be fair, Schlesers is not a Harvard graduate. Schlesers has gotten an education by experience in business practices, and Schlesers was in some sort of a Christian junior college or something in Norway. And to his credit, he learned the Norwegian language. He brought Norwegian companies into Latvia that set up a lot of the retailing businesses here. But again, he then went off on his own tangent, founded 3 or 4 or 5 political parties and pushed along with this kind of populistic holy roller version of religion and politics.
Latvian politics are always weird because we're kind of tied to our neighbor and everything. But, just to get a bit more specific and everything, so we basically have 3 candidates. And it's time we name them. So we have Uldis Pīlāns, we have Edgars Rinkēvičs, and we have Elina Pinto. Well, let's start with Mr. Pīlāns.
Architect, businessman, does a lot of business in Sweden and the Nordic countries. I had a really strange experience when I was at the OSCE conference in Stockholm in December 21, I believe it was, and there was a snowstorm, and again, another person that you mentioned, Mr. Rinkēvičs, had flown back to Riga a day before, or just as that whole thing was ending, and his plane skidded off the runway. So Riga airport was closed for several hours, dealing with that situation, dealing with a snowstorm. So there we were stuck in Stockholm. And as I tried to board the aircraft that was later canceled, there were all of these physically fit looking Latvian men standing around, 40, 50 of them, or if not more. Who were they? They were Pīlāns' construction crews. He rotated them every couple of weeks, and the flight that they had been intended to fly upon had been canceled. And it turned out that Pīlāns had been working so hard and with such dedication on these projects that he was even flying these people on charter flights when there was no air traffic between Sweden and Latvia at the height of the pandemic. I mean, they found out from talking to these gentlemen who were standing around. So give him credit for that. He is, if not an international businessman, he's a regional businessman and property developer and all that. But as I said, then again, he's got probably fairly conservative and not really clear views on a lot of issues. He's kind of a technocrat. He has apparently pushed the United List into all of these things that everything should be sort of run on a crisis management basis. Now, there are certainly areas of policy in Latvia that perhaps should be run on a crisis management basis, such as healthcare and such as maybe education. But there are a lot of other things that it's not necessary to be in a state of constant crisis management. The idea of interministerial coordination and contacts is sort of okay. I mean, it's one way to prevent the waste of public monies or the duplication of services. But other than that, he's kind of a slightly green. The party as a whole is kind of a sort of slightly green, but probably deeply conservative and somewhat technocratic thing of some kind.
See, that's the thing. He's the most boring candidate of all of them. I'm sorry, but again, I repeat, this is a representative function, and he's efficient, maybe, but how about we finally have someone who writes their own speeches as a president? Just saying. I mean, maybe we could have someone who has like public speaking skills and all that whatnot. I mean, this is not a job that is for the so-called number pushers. This is for guys who, kiss the babies and all that whatnot.
Now, the other candidate, the other male candidate, Edgars Rinkēvičs, probably would do a very good job, except
he also has no spine. I'm sorry, but I personally believe that.
Well, I think he's done a fairly good job of representing Latvia as a foreign minister. He shouldn't be taken off of that job. I mean, he arrived in Kyiv on the 23rd of February last year, had to make his way home by car, and he arrived with a load of man-pad missiles, Stingers, for the Ukrainians. I mean, that was probably on another aircraft. So
he's good at his job. It's just that he's very diplomatic, and I would say too diplomatic. Like, he's extremely good at that. And what I meant with like lack of spine here, it was just he will always try to do the diplomatic thing, which he knows best, right? Even in cases where a more aggressive approach would be better suited.
Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, and he should maybe not be taken off a job that he's doing rather well, especially while we are still in the middle of this whole Ukraine war.
A lot of people have been angry at Scott Adams lately because he has some weird political views, but he has a thing called Dilbert principle, which means that in any sufficiently large organization, you get promoted to the point where you stop being competent. He posted this about engineers. If you are a sufficiently good engineer, you get promoted to management because you are good at programming and you're a good engineer. But then you might lack people skills and you are, well, quite bad as manager. And because you're quite bad as manager, you cannot get promoted higher. But you also, can't be demoted because you can probably pull through your job. And if you get demoted at some point, well, then you are still an extremely good engineer who will get promoted once again. So basically everyone ends up being stuck in positions where they're not qualified for. This reminds me with Levich too. I am afraid Edgar Sienkiewicz might be this person. He's, like you said, extremely good at diplomatic stuff. But I don't think he would be a good president.
That's not the job of the president, except you have to maybe be diplomatic within the various interest groups and political, social groupings here in Latvia. You have to be able to speak, and appear before people in Latgale, you may have to go to the whole Aglona thing every summer, and at the same time you have to speak to LGBT community when they have their pride. As I think one of the presidents, I think Zatlers, actually sent a message to them. And then you have to speak to businessmen, you have to speak to pensioners, you have to, there maybe those skills would come out, but then who would be foreign minister in his place? There's talk of this guy Coles from National Alliance. I mean, who would be,
I have a candidate for you. Antis Slakteris, obviously.
Antis Slakteris, right, yeah.
Antis Slakteris. Nothing special, of course.
I don't know. I think we have more comedians than him in the country.
He wasn't a comedian. If you haven't heard this, dear listeners, check out. This is a part of post-Soviet arrogance, so to speak. Well, who was he at the time? I think Minister of the Interior, I think.
No, Slakteris was Minister of Finance.
Oh, yeah, I think it was Finance. It was during the 2008 crisis, and
yeah.
He was giving an interview to the BBC, I think, or like some Western media, basically.
It was Bloomberg News, because I know the Bloomberg correspondent.
Oh yeah. So basically, he was offered a translator as usual, but him trying to show off his English skills. Or for whatever reason, he just denied the translator service. And then he made all of Latvia facepalm collectively because of how terrible everything was.
I remember that. Yep.
Well, definitely. Good point.
Did show off his language skills, so to speak. Not in the sense that most people would say.
Oh, talking about that, I'll use this opportunity to advertise a thing a bit. I just finished, by the way, an article for Foreign Policy magazine, which was the hardest thing I've written in my life. And I'm really glad the editor there, James Palmer, actually finally, he showed competence and just showed me why I am not a native English speaker, despite that my English is quite good. I just... You'll understand this because this is like a tangent, but quite important. I had to explain what понятие or Soviet prison laws are to the Westerners. This is going to publish on Wednesday. It was supposed to be a 1,000-word article, ended up in 3,000 words because otherwise Institute for Study of War and everyone else, they just don't understand what Prigozhin is talking about. And that was brutal. If you want to read that one, go to Foreign Policy magazine because that makes me money. Please go and click. Little ad there.
Hello there, and thanks for listening to another episode of The Eastern Border. Dear Patreons, thank you more than ever for supporting our show. Your donations are crucial to keep us going, and right now all of your money is going to securing good information for you and to fund Kristup's actual real-life mission to Ukraine to report to you live about the war that is going on there. Also, we would like to use this opportunity to urge you to donate to other organizations that are helping people escape Ukraine safely and to defend the country for those who decide to stay on the ground. One such organization we would like to highlight is the Defending Ukraine Together Come Back Alive movement. Launched in 2014, the Come Back Alive became the biggest organization providing support to the armed forces of Ukraine. You can donate directly from their webpage, comebackalive.in.ua. Remember that no donation is too small. In this situation, every dollar matters, every cent matters. If you're uncomfortable with giving money to war, they do have a position on their website that they are providing Ukrainian army with laptops, lights, photo equipment, cables, and is not purely military. Perhaps that might change your mind, but remember you can also donate to strictly humanitarian organizations such as the Red Cross and others that are helping people escape Ukraine safely. Please also keep following us on social media for all of your latest updates on Eastern Border on places like Twitter and Facebook. Keep listening, keep yourself informed. That's all from me now. See you online.
Well, okay, we've sort of gone past Rinkevich. Maybe we can talk about Elena Pinto.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have an interview with her coming up, I think, tomorrow because they agreed to that. And she's interesting. She's really interesting because these two guys, I'd say they're not infected with, they are post-Soviet people. Elena Pinto is not. She's kind of special.
She's exactly a year older than necessary to be president, 41. She was a teenager, or maybe not even that, when the country regained its independence. And I get the impression that she spent a lot of time out there in Europe, that she spent a lot of time in European Union institutions, at the same time clinging strongly to her Latvian identity by being part of the European Latvian Association, running it for a while and all that. And I think she has 3 kids, and she's married to a Luxembourgeois diplomat or something like that. And I think it is no accident that the progressives picked her, because her views are fairly much in line with the progressives' views on partnership laws, on diminishing inequality in this country, on being openness, tolerance, all of that stuff. And that's what we need. I am not sure that too many people are interested in having that, but...
See, there's my thing. She is 99% not going to get elected. If we're going to talk about re-election candidates, Pilans is also not going to get elected. I think Rinkevich is going to be our president.
Oh, okay, well...
I firmly believe that part. I do believe Miss Pinto here is there to become some sort of a new leader of the Progressive Party. Because Progressive Party is special because they are, in a way, our new left. Because previously, traditionally left and right in Latvia and in Baltics and in post-Soviet sphere have been like pro-Russian guys and anti-Russian guys. Well, that was how it was viewed by the people. I think for Pinto, this run is more closely oriented to becoming the new leader of the Progressive Party. Although she, by the way, has claimed to be not affiliated to any party, but come on.
Well, we'll see. I think that the current leadership, they have a dual leadership there now. These are sort of two figures that are sort of fairly known in their own circles within the Progressive Party. And the Progressives had a couple of weird things. They had the previous leader there was Putnis, I believe is his name.
Oh, yeah. I think we laughed at him a bit when we spoke about our previous election 4 years ago or something. He now posts very provocative pictures on Facebook all the time. It's just weird. He
apparently was a pretty controversial leader in the way he was running things there. Never mind his sexual orientation, which should really not be an issue and will not be an issue if... Well, it will be an issue briefly if Rinkevich gets elected, because somebody has already dug up, Rinkevich's "Hi there, I'm gay" tweet from like 10 years ago, whatever it was, and they will make a short circus of that anyway. But what Putis was doing, he was sort of flaunting for a while his leanings toward a kind of leather-wearing, sadomasochistic direction in the whole LGBT thing, which I'm not really familiar with. But that, if you talk about what may grate against the average sort of semi-conservative but not totally intolerant Latvian, that is that sort of thing. There I am strutting around Berlin wearing some sort of, leather pants and trying to look sexy in the eyes of how people, who are into that thing think is sexy. And that, well, I could sort of look at that and say, okay, I'll put this out there, it is a weird hat, and fine. But other people say, oh my God,
Certainly he is a personality, but it's a bit of a bizarre way how to act as a leader of a political party. That's it. He can do whatever. I mean, I'm not against people having fun. It's fine, but
no, he's not a leader anymore. He's free to be the dude on the streets of wherever he is, right? And fine. I hope he enjoys himself. Now, Ellie de Pinto, she does not. What creatures are waiting for her in the jungle or the pit or the political arena into which she's going? Whether as president or whether as somebody who has aspirations to be a significant leader of the progressives, or
well, I'll just say relentless optimism does achieve some results.
Oh, yeah.
That's, by the way, the thing that I've learned from Americans here. If you are in Latvia and you have a little bit of assertiveness in you, then you can achieve a lot of things. But not all the things. In Latvia, smile and optimism is not enough. You have to have smile, optimism, and a loaded, as they say in the joke, loaded Colt revolver, too. You have to be a cynical bastard sometimes, which is a thing that I think a lot of people kind of don't want to admit. We don't like to say that our political leaders need to be tough at some points. We like to be the very political people, very kind of polite and correct guys who are like, someone has to be a nice person, someone has to have achieved something in business, all this stuff. We tend to forget that these guys need to have some, or ladies, need to have some grit. And I do believe Pinto she's a bit naive, but she has this grit in her, which is why I personally like her.
I hope so. I mean, I would prefer her because I don't know what really, Pilac is thinking, and he also had business in Russia, and he was actually called out on having delivered some sort of equipment that ended up in Russia, but this may well have been before all of the sanctions and everything, but then he said, oh, the buyer was an Austrian company. I mean, but he must have known why the Austrian company was buying that stuff.
Well, okay, dear American listeners, I had a short intro to history of Austria. Besides Austria-Hungary and all this stuff, Austria was occupied after World War II just as Germany was, except that the Russians left them alone because they signed a deal of perpetual neutrality, basically, sort of, thing like that, which is why Vienna was the capital of spies for a long while, because the occupying Soviet troops left after the Austrian government paid them a lot of money and promised to basically not get into NATO and not support anything, which is why they, until this day, they don't even condone, at least on a public level. You might have heard of every country in Europe and United States and Canada, everyone else, basically in the Western world, sending support for Ukraine, but Austrians have not sent anything, even though they have a bunch of very good weapons manufacturers. There's Glock, for example. Glock is Austrian. I think Beretta is Austrian too. They are stuck there with their weird politics, which have made them bed buddies with Russia quite often.
Swiss have delivered ammunition to something to Ukraine.
Yeah, Austria has not.
Well, okay.
At least as far as I know.
I'm just using that Austria as an example. That he said that, well, really, the buyer was Austria. The buyer was not Russia directly. So
yes, of course, after Panama Papers, this whole thing about, oh no, it's totally not. X is like super popular. I don't even. Sometimes I believe that a lot of politicians think that their average person who's voting for them is stupid. Well, they're not wrong constantly, but there are still people who like to use their brains. And when someone says real buyer is someone else, I mean we can check. It is possible to check. So I just don't know why they even play these tricks.
Yeah. Well, anyway, but what worries me the most is that the Looney Tune opposition in the Saima, the Stabilitate party, the For Stability party, which is kind of, represents local Russian.
Let me explain this to people. Stability has been Putin's slogan for many, many years. Everything is for stability. At least Russia is stable. So stability is a term traditionally associated with Putin and United Russia Party. So that's why they picked it. It's kind of innocuous if you don't know what's up. But if you've been following politics, then...
Okay, I hadn't thought of that. And they're not going to come out and start waving Russian flags with Z on them, but you could get the feeling how they are leaning into the wind, in this issue.
Yeah, but they haven't actually. Do you think their votes could matter in this presidential election? Because again, we have. For my dear listeners, we have 100 deputies elected in Saima, our parliament, and then they elect the president. So we have 100 votes. And this party, For Stability, I think has like 5 or 6 votes, which could be crucial, but...
The one defector from their party, this lady, Gloria Grevtsova, who is now an independent candidate. This is another Latvian political phenomenon called the wandering of the cat.
So let us talk about Ms. Grevtsova, because she's amazing enough that if I have you on the show and we're here, we definitely must talk about Ms. Grevtsova. She lied about her education and everything on her kind of questionnaire to even apply to run for office. I think she lied about her education. She said that she's graduated from law faculty or something, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there were a number of things. There were issues raised against her, and the lying part, or the deception, or the not telling the full truth part, or however you want to formulate that. That was the issue. Also, that she kind of made a statement that the Occupation Museum, the Museum of the Occupation of Latvia, which covers both the Soviet and Nazi German periods when this country was under foreign control, that she thought a lot of it was like propaganda or whatever. She made some sort of a kind of statement that was skeptical of that story, and thereby was skeptical of the whole or appeared to be skeptical of the idea that Latvia was a forcibly occupied and oppressed country.
That's a popular myth here, because that one and the fact that apparently we belong to Russia because in the Winter War in 1721, 18th century, apparently Charles XII sold these lands at the peace deal to Russia, which is total historical nonsense. If you want to pull out 18th century documentation, then all of this belongs to, great mother Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania. It's just bizarre.
Forcible conquests of the past are not legitimacy for claiming the rights to own a country that has a democratically elected government and a democratic political system.
I do have to make a stupid joke here, but ladies in the lake handing out swords is not a basis for a legitimate system of government.
Exactly, yeah, well,
If you can quote Monty Python on something, then you kind of have to. It's a law. It is mandatory. But yeah, I don't know. Rolling back to our presidential candidates, I think Rinkevich, like you said, it's just weird to see him there. I mean, I don't understand exactly why he was picked to be the president.
They are taking a major risk at sort of changing horses in midstream during the war against Ukraine with our foreign minister. That's the only thing that I see is kind of weird about the whole thing.
Yeah, yes. All these candidates, all 3 of them, they were picked by their parties. There must be some argument there. I just don't see the logic because, like you said, he's just really, really good at being a foreign minister. Why would you want to push him out of this? And he's like...
Who are you going to replace him with? Richard Coles has been mentioned, but there are no clear... Coles is a National Alliance parliamentarian, and I think he sits on a few Saima committees, and so he's...
All this was weird to me because, for one, I genuinely thought that Coles would be better off as defense minister.
Mm-hmm.
At least I heard that idea. Maybe this is a shift to kind of fix their coalition issues, but it's just weird. Pilans is a businessman.
But I think the real message in all of this is that there is a serious, quiet attempt to knock down the present government.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that is what is really going on here.
I absolutely agree.
And as I put it, I had a little article out on Substack where I said that PLADS, which translates to English as duckling.
Sorry, you have to stop it. You have to stop it and advertise your Substack so that my people can subscribe to it. What's your Substack, Juris?
Well, look it up. Just look up Juris Kaža Substack and you'll find it. Anyway,
I'll post this in the show notes. It's going to be there. Yeah.
Post it in the show notes. You'll find it. Anyway, PLADS, which means duckling, is being used by the opposition, and not by the entire opposition, but by the loony bird opposition in Latvia, to cook the goose of courage.
Oh, courage is an interesting case. I mean, as I see it, all these technocrats in power, they're really good when everything's rolling smoothly, and you want a leader that, takes a 5% increase in economy and quality of life and turns it into a 6 or 7% increase. Basically, they can push good times to be slightly more better. But when crises hit, again, that is my more rough attitude towards things. I do believe we need someone who can rein in the coalition, so to speak, make them actually do their jobs, such as, following our constitutional court, Sandras Misties, about the decisions and stuff.
Well, that was one of the big failures, that they failed, that he let the opposition and, in the old parliament, the previous one, the opposition and the pro-Russian party, Harmony, basically block the partnership law.
Yeah.
In defiance of the constitutional court. That's what happened.
Stripes was very angry about this when he was on the show, by the way. That was just
Stripes is generally angry at a lot of things. So
that is true though.
That is, I think, that is the big game being played here. That's a tectonic shift here. And then we will have, thanks to the fact that the progressives, at the insistence of the I think the National Alliance, but certainly also with the compliance of the United List and PLADS people, kept the progressives out of government. And now we have this situation where the government is going to be out of government if this whole scheme goes through. And Schlesers is waiting in the wings to take over as the Latvian Donald Trump.
I probably have to explain to this. Both the New Unity Party, New Unity and the United List, they are both kind of partners in coalition in the government, and they are both sending different candidates for president. From the same coalition thing, they're sending two candidates, which already is, causing conflict. From the opposition, at least progressives are just sending Miss Pinto.
Well, they're sending Miss Pinto. They're doing something. They want to present some sort of alternative to this.
I believe Rinkiewicz is going to get elected. They're going to push it through somehow. But what's your idea? Who's going to be our next president, and what's going to change in our foreign policy with that?
It's not so much as our next president. I think if PLADS gets in, then the PLADS will be the instrument of a coup against Courage.
Yeah, but what's he going to do after that? I mean, he still has 4 years to give speeches and kiss babies and give speeches mostly.
Well, that's not important. He is the tool of conservative, reactionary, socially conservative, religious movement here in Latvia. Latvia Pirmā vietā, Latvia first. And of eventually a pro-Russian tilt to things.
A pro-Russian tilt would be extremely unpopular among the Latvian people. We can't agree on many things here in Latvia, both our political views and everything, but I highly doubt that anyone who would try to openly support Russia would remain in power. I mean...
Oh, no, you're right. But I mean, you wind back Schlesers a few years before everything got going in open warfare in Ukraine with the invasion.
Mm-hmm.
He was all for trading with our great boundless market out there and transit business and everything else. He was all for that. He was one of these, Russia's always going to be our neighbor. We have to deal with him, all that stuff, Well, yeah, Russia is out there. There it is. What else are you going to do? But the fact that a country that is a net exporter of raw materials and that has an economy the size of a smaller or mid-sized West European country or an American state, I mean, that is not something that you have to be striving to have excellent relations or excellent economic trade relations with. I don't see the point of it.
And then we come to the war part of this, because, I think we have about 15 minutes to wrap this up. Russia in the future, that's the thing. I still believe Russia is going to fall apart in the minor republics and everything. And we are going to have to build this whole new society system, international system to work with them. I think Khodorkovsky might make a play for everything, but how do we even build after this war ends? And it is going to end with Russia losing. There is no way. I have bet money on this, and I believe in my bet. I just can't see Russia winning in any way or form, and I do believe it's going to split up. But if it does, or if it doesn't, whatever, how are we going to build our relationships in the rest of Europe? How is our presidential thing going to work out? Because we're next to them. We're going to have to talk to them somehow. It's just so weird. It's just awkward.
First of all, there will have to be measures to contain any chaos spillover. And that means that even if the war, if the Russians are run out of the Ukraine, we should go ahead with the whole idea that Courage and everybody else has been mentioning, that we need full NATO combat brigades in this country to react to any sort of issues.
Yeah.
Even after that. That could include, keeping sort of warlord armies from spilling over here, dealing with mass migrations and all of that, which could happen in Russia. We don't know exactly what form of disintegration will hit Russia. And some of that disintegration will involve reprisals by areas or ethnic groups that have been suffering under Russia all these years, not just past 30 years, but, I would say going back for hundreds of years. And they're going to go and try to sort of deal with who they see as those responsible for their oppression, backwardness, and suffering, which means a civil war.
By the way, another thing, talking about minorities, including ones here, our pro-Russian parties used to hide their pro-Russianness by claiming that they are defending the rights of the minorities. And, we have a recent influx of Pakistanis and Indians and everyone here. And I spoke to one of these guys, and turns out that he's, currently all these pro-Russian people, they're very racist towards our Indian people who are living here, because they're apparently competing them out, because now, their politicians have to change the tune very quickly, because their electorate does not support, representing all minorities and stuff.
Big surprise. I mean...
yeah, totally shocked here. Absolutely.
There is a lot of latent racism, not only among the Russians, but also among Latvians here. Maybe less so, but...
One of the things I understood, which I'm going to write an article about, is that what do you want if, 99% of Latvia's population have only gotten information about black people from gangster rap videos and Hollywood movies? And that's it. Right. We are just uneducated. We're not evil, I think. That's my view on things.
No, we're that's going to be a problem. And I think that there are a lot of people who want to sort of go back to purely Latvian, white Latvia, and don't want any of this, multicultural rainbow, whatever, diversity nonsense, as they call it, which is not nonsense. It is basically the reality of a 21st century world. And a 21st century interconnected world, and we're not, I was having a debate with someone on Facebook here, and I was saying that Latvians are not going to be like that undiscovered tribe in the Brazilian jungle that even throws spears at helicopters, So
there are two options on this planet Earth, and there are people who defend either of them, trying to kind of remain more or less neutral here. But you can either be multicultural and rich, or you can be monocultural and poor. And secondly, I despise the whining part. I mean, we should teach immigrants how to celebrate Yani and celebrate our traditions as well. We should not be suffering and again claiming that, oh no, everything's bad, they're going to destroy our culture. No, we won't destroy our culture if we teach them things, and we'll just stop whining for one and do something about it, That's the thing.
You're basically right. I mean, people who are here, I think the whole thing with the people of different appearance, most of the people of different appearance that we see here are not going to remain here for the rest of their lives. These are the Indian students, the South Asians, and they're visible, A, because they look different from us, and B, because they have dominated certain professions such as food delivery. And why do they do that? Because they have flexible working hours, and they're usually students. These guys are the IT company leaders of the future, or the engineers and technocrats and whatever. And they're not going to stay here. They're not necessarily going to go back to their Southeast Asian countries, but they may end up in Silicon Valley. They may end up in United Kingdom or else.
This reminds me of how whole Russian propaganda looked back in 1905 and 1904 when they had their own Russo-Japanese war, which Russia lost miserably. Just like they're losing now in Ukraine, where they were like, the Japanese are coming, the Asians are coming, it's evil and terrible, they're going to conquer all of us. They were also considered weak and stupid at the same time, because fascism is dumb. Fascism at the same time portrays its enemies as this superior force that's going to destroy everything, and at the same time weak and miserable. And you can't only have one. And it turns out that if you live by an ideology that makes no sense internally, then you will lose, because that's just a losing mindset.
Yeah, well, you could wrap up on the fact that crypto-fascist mentality has got to go.
Definitely, because
here, in Russia, everywhere.
Why don't they make up new arguments? Because every time I hear these crypto-fascists speak, it's always the same bullshit that has been debunked so many times. Maybe they should learn to read a bit more, but, in general.
I think that's the problem, yep. And learn to read in different languages and learn to read from different sources.
Okay, thanks, Juris, for this, and it was nice to have you on, and
anytime.
Let's see who gets elected. Yeah.
You could also get that other guy with my last name.
Matis, nice. I believe Juris Kaža, our very famous movie director from Latvia, made Neon Spring, amazing movie. You should watch it if you haven't seen it already. It's great. Thank you, and as always, happiness is mandatory.
Thank you for listening to the Eastern Border Show. If you have any questions or comments, go to our website, theeasternborder.lv, and leave a comment there. Or email us at theeasternborder@gmail.com. We'll be sure to answer. You can also follow us on social media and contact us there. If you enjoyed this episode, then leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about us. It really helps us grow the show. And remember, happiness is mandatory.